There's heroes and there's legends. Heroes get remembered, but legends never die.
It's the Sitting Sportside podcast, exclusively on 1045theteam.com.
Oh, no! Because there's no crying in baseball. There's no crying in baseball! No crying!
Welcome into the Sittin Sportside podcast. I'm Eric Hammond, going solo and previewing the American League Central Division. It's going to be a great couple of podcasts. Well, I say couple. It's going to be 6 total, obviously, as we look at many of the teams, all the teams in Major League Baseball. And this specific podcast is exclusively about my thoughts on the American League Central. And the opening there is very important. And I say that because there's no crying in baseball, which means there should be no crying when I preview your team, and maybe it's not how you like it. But here's how I also want to preface how I do some of these previews as well, is there is a lot of unpredictability, if you will, in baseball sometimes. I mean, last year, or 2 years ago, there was the Twins, who were this team that actually was competing for the American League wild card in the division 2 years ago, and now they turned into the worst team in baseball last year. And I had thought maybe the Twins were going to take another step last year, and it didn't happen. What I will allow you guys to do is let me know your opinions and tweet at me at EricH1045, and then also, too, if you want to gloat in my face when I'm wrong on some of the predictions, you can do that as well. But I just don't want no crying. No crying. If I don't think your team's going to do well, no crime, but I also say that I'm going to try to take some kind of positives. I like to get some positives of these teams. So the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to start from the team that I think is going to come in last place, 5th place in the division, and go from there. And I'll try to get you, I know we're a little late into the season, if you will. We're into the season of drafting, I'm saying. But I'll still try to get you a sleeper pick of a draft pick, maybe on each team, some guy that I like, whether it's a pitcher or a hitter, or maybe I'll give you both. I don't know, but we'll see. Start off with the 5th place team. This one's kind of obvious because of the fact, if you look at the Central right now, the weakest team is easily the team that kind of had the biggest sell job, right, of the offseason, and that was the Chicago White Sox. They sold Chris Sale. They traded Chris Sale. They traded Adam Eaton, but they got a lot of good pieces in return. What the product is on the field, though, it's not going to be great in terms of being able to lean. It wasn't great the last couple of years, even with Chris Sale, even with Adam Eaton. They finished in 4th place last year, 6 games under 500. Obviously not as bad as the Twins were, so there was a big discrepancy between them and the Twins. 19 games. That's how bad the Twins were last year, but I think that the White Sox are probably going to regress. Well, the Twins, but we'll go into the Twins in a second. There's still a lot of positives on the Chicago White Sox in terms of what might happen to them this season. They got Lucas Giolito and Yoan Moncada from that deal in the Nationals, as well as Reynaldo Lopez and Dane Dunning. Moncada obviously was from the Red Sox deal, but Giolito, Lopez, and Dane Dunning all from that Adam Eaton deal. I think all 3 of them could possibly be in the majors this season, with Dane Dunning getting his debut. Giolito deserves, I think at some point will deserve a shot. And then obviously that Red Sox deal. They got a lot of good young pieces from that one. Obviously Michael Kopech is another one from that deal that people are thinking about. I'm not sure we're going to see Kopech this year. He's got, obviously, he threw the ball 107 miles an hour. So his name is obviously big right now. But Yoan Moncada is probably the one who's going to be up first. That would be the name I would give to you in a fantasy baseball draft. And I'll give you another name at the end here, because the only reason that's not necessarily a good one is because he might not be up till mid-season. The reason this team is going to struggle is because I don't think they have a deep enough pitching, and they don't have deep enough hitting. And a big reason why they're going to, even if they have a hot first half, they're going to fall off somehow after the All-Star break, and definitely after the deadline, because of Todd Frazier, and maybe even Dave Robertson. Because there's different areas from this team that they look to trade. Robertson maybe has more left on his deal. His contract might be harder to move, but Todd Frazier's a guy they're definitely going to want to move. And regardless of what kind of seasons he's having, they're going to try to move Todd Frazier in this offseason. Now, Jose Abreu, unfortunately for him, he was hot when he came over. Fortunately for him, he's going, he didn't have as great of a season. He's kind of almost regressed a little bit in his second and third season since that rookie year. But he's going to have to really go through this. Offense is not going to be overly powering. Peter Borges is going to help out the pitching staff in center field, but there's just not enough hitting, I think, on this team, and the rotation really only goes Carlos Rodon deep and Jose Quintana. Because I look at Miguel Gonzalez, Derek Holland, James Shields, who are all probably going to be in the rotation to start the season. Those are all guys that are going to have ERAs, in my opinion, probably 4 or above. And if one of them gets below 4, it's probably going to be 350, 375, which is nothing to shake a stick at, but they're all going to be tough guys to replicate. So I'm not going to spend much more time on this team. A guy to look at and target in your fantasy drafts, I would say, is shortstop Tim Anderson. Probably going to hit at the top of the lineup. And if he's probably going to lead the team in runs scored, maybe even lead the team in average. That's just a good Tim Anderson can. In points leagues, he will strike out a little bit, but I think the average is still going to be there. The average definitely would be there for Tim Anderson. I think he'll score a lot of runs, maybe get the base pass. But Yohan Moncada, just like I said, keep your eye on Yohan Moncada. Maybe even Lucas Giolito and Reynaldo Lopez if they come up and start pitching well. But Yohan Moncada could be a fantasy monster with his power numbers, along with he's going to steal a lot of bases. Let's get off the White Sox. I think they're a 5th place team. Unfortunately for them, but they're building, and they've done a lot of great things in the offseason to build them for what is the future. And kind of taking a page out of the Chicago Cubs and their crosstown rivals by acquiring a lot of young talent, which I think they'll do again at this deadline, like I said, with Todd Frazier, maybe even David Robertson, maybe Melky Cabrera as well. Now for the 4th place team, it's those Minnesota Twins. And last year I was really high. I was bullish on these Minnesota Twins. I'm not going to be as bullish. I still like a lot of the pieces that they have. Keeping Brian Dozier obviously keeps them with a good player or a good bat in the middle of that lineup. Joe Mauer is an interesting case because of the fact that maybe he was great as a catcher, and that bat I think has really gone down a little bit, and yet he's still not going to be a great option necessarily, especially for power-wise at first base. So I think that hinders them. But the outfield I think is bright with Eddie Rosario in left, Byron Buxton in center, and Max Kepler in right. I think that outfield is going to blossom at some point. And really that infield as well. If Sano can stay healthy, the worst I think that actually with Jorge Polanco at shortstop, I think that the worst and maybe the weakest part of the infield, I'm not saying this as a definitive thing, might be Joe Mauer in the terms of what your production is from a first baseman, right? Like Jose Abreu, going back to the White Sox, is more of a power guy. He hit 300 once. Mauer's just going to get you probably average, but he's not necessarily going to get you 20, 25 home runs. Maybe they'll get that from Kenny Vargas or maybe even Bungo Park, who's having a good spring. But Jason Castro, bringing him to play catcher. Kurt Suzuki was all right last year. So the offense, I think, is an offense that's actually kind of underrated. I think they're going to be an offense that could possibly really overachieve in some people's eyes. Now, let's take a look at the rotation. There's not that deep of a rotation, and it's really got a lot of unproven guys. Jose Barrios and Tyler Duffy. They're two guys that actually kind of pitched well at certain points, especially in their minor league career for Barrios. Barrios did not pitch well in the major leagues at all. If he can get that going at some point, that would be huge for that rotation, because right now with Irvin Santana and Hector Santiago, that might be the extent of how good the rotation can be. Unless Duffy can get more consistent, Phil Houston have a good rebound, and Kyle Gibson get more consistent, that's going to be their issue for them. Their bullpen is okay with Kinsler and Perkins at the back end. But overall, this team probably is not going to have good enough pitching, and maybe not even maybe they'll trade Dozier. Maybe they'll find a trade partner for Dozier midseason. I don't see it that way. They could be a team that makes some noise, but like 2 years ago when they made noise, I'm not sure they're going to be able to keep up with the rest of this division and the rest of the teams in the American League. Now let's go to our 3rd place team. The history behind this team kind of makes you want to go with them to have a better year, right? The Kansas City Royals, last year they finished in 3rd place, dead at 500, 81 and 81, but they really struggled last year to get back to their World Series form. And they're kind of going to be the same type of team this year. You lose your closer in Wade Davis. You have a good guy to step in Kelvin Herrera. You lose Kendrys Morales. You get Brandon Moss, who's kind of like, you can step in and really put up good power numbers. I agree with that. But with a lot of injuries, Salvador Perez got some possible concerns after what happened to him in the Billard World Baseball Classic. But then you got guys like Jorge Soler. He's going to be the right fielder as opposed to Gerard Dyson, two different type of players. And if Soler can put something together, I really think that he can be a really good player. I love the transfer to the Royals because they were able to get a guy, Jorge Soler, who has a ton of upside for Wade Davis, who is a free agent after next season. And like I said, they have Kelvin Herrera who can step into that closer role. I think that it just really bodes well for the Royals getting Jorge Soler because they have him locked down for the future. The outfield is the same with Lorenzo Cain across the front, now moving from right to left and center. Cain in center, Gordon in left, who had a down year last year. And a good thing about Brandon Moss, like I said, he can play the outfield and he can play first base and give Hosmer a day off. And that's going to be a big part this year. And so for the Royals, I look at this team and I think that maybe the pitching isn't going to be deep enough. I think you look at Danny Duffy. He's going to be the ace of this rotation. He's a good pitcher. He did actually a good job he's done a good job for the USA in the World Baseball Classic. But then you calling down at Ian Kennedy, Jason Hamill. While Hamill had a very good year in terms of regular season statistics and not pitch a lick in the postseason for the Cubs, but he had a good season for them. But in the American League, remember, he got traded a couple of years ago from the Cubs to the Athletics. He did a very bad job in the American League with the A's, and that had to do with mid-season. He wasn't in necessarily mid-season form. It was mid-season. He was by mid-season form, I mean he was kind of wearing down already. And you can put that part of it. He might get off to a hot start. I just don't really trust Jason Hamill for a full 32 starts. And then you have Nathan Carnes, who officially won the 5th rotation job. And you had Jason Vargas also getting the rotation, who's really coming off a complete lost season last year, pitched a little bit towards the end of the year. So the pitching is a little bit suspect, and really it's kind of a depressing year for the Royals because this is the last chance, And the reason I say that is because you have Mike Moustakas at third base and Eric Hosmer, two guys you could lose as well. You could even lose Lorenzo Cain. So maybe this is a team. This is a possibility, and I really think this team could compete this year. I really do. Ned Yost always does a good job with this team, but the Kansas City Royals could be heavy sellers at the deadline only because the guys are going to be leaving. Maybe they will trade Lorenzo Cain. Unless they think that they can really get these guys back, they might actually be sellers at the trade deadline. And I didn't give you a player for the for the Twins. I gave you a player for the White Sox. That was Tim Anderson. I'll give you my player for the Royals first, and I'll go back to the Twins. The player I really like for the Royals, I already mentioned him, but Jorge Soler. I think he could be a high upside player for them. And also keep an eye on Pete O'Brien. He's actually hit a lot of home runs. He's a big power guy. If you're in need of power mid-season, keep your eye on Brandon Moss, whether he gets injured or not, because Pete O'Brien might come up. Like I said, Jorge Soler could be a big-time player, especially if he gets off to a hot start. Still struggling in spring training a little bit, but if he gets off to a hot start, I think he could be a very good player, especially in the change of scenery and the everyday playing time. Before, remember, he doesn't really have a secure playing time over with the Chicago Cubs. Now he's got security. Maybe he'll have Paulo Orlando breathing down his shoulder if he struggles, or Brandon Moss still there, and maybe even Pete O'Brien comes out to DH. You also have Billy Burns, who I really like as a speedster, who could be what Dyson was for them if they really need him to be in right field. But I think that the consistency for Jorge Soler will get him to, I think, a good season. And then the guy I liked, I mentioned him a little bit before, but Byron Buxton is a guy that obviously could be a big part of a team late in drafts. Jorge Polanco, I think he's probably going to go undrafted in a lot of drafts. He might hit around the top of that order, and even if he doesn't, he's still a guy that could hit over 300 and be a big-time player, maybe even on the base pass as well. So keep your eye on Jorge Polanco. Shortstops are pretty deep, I believe. Nowadays, shortstops are pretty deep in these leagues. But Jorge Polanco, if you need a guy, I think he might even be eligible at second base, maybe even third base. But he's definitely eligible at shortstop, or at least he will be. He definitely is. And I think he'll be a grip player for you late in the draft. If you really did you just drop the ball and getting a shortstop and focused on elsewhere, he could be a huge find late in draft. Second place team, I think it's kind of easy to understand maybe where I'm going with the second place team, because right now I'm kind of having a similar way of how this worked out last year. And this is the Detroit Tigers. And this team hasn't gotten worse, but it hasn't gotten better. And that's not a good thing, because it's not like you have prospects waiting in the wings to get better. And so that's where the issue kind of drops me with the Detroit Tigers. It's kind of like maybe I kind of looking at all these teams, I'm thinking they're all going to be sellers, because this is a team, I don't think they'll sell Miguel Cabrera. I don't think they'll necessarily sell Victor Martinez unless they're really bad around the trade deadline. I don't think they'll sell Ian Kinsler. But these are older guys and that are heavier contracts. We all know that this was a team that was looking to sell over the offseason, and they didn't do anything. Their minor league system is very thin, but a rotation of Justin Verlander, Mike Fulmer, Jordan Zimmerman, Daniel Norris, and then you have the fifth guy, whether it's Anibal Sanchez, Matt Boyd, and Mike Pelfrey, not a great option in that fifth spot. But those first four, and especially if Jordan Zimmerman can rebound. I know he had a lot of injury problems, but if he can rebound, we're looking at a guy who could be a big part of this rotation. And Justin Verlander and Mike Fulmer, I think, are going to be two really good guys, unless Fulmer regresses after winning Rookie of the Year in the American League. Daniel Norris is another guy, too. He's young. So they still have some young guys with Fulmer and Norris. And they have Stephen Moya on the outfield who might get a bench job. But that's really the extent of where their prospects lie. But like I said, they still have a very good offense that could really possibly put something together with that top three pitching. And if you add in Jordan Zimmerman, if he can put together a bounce-back season in the form he was with the Washington Nationals. Kinsler at the top of that lineup. You got Miguel Cabrera, one of the best of all time. So, V-Mart, very underrated player. J.D. Martinez, if he can stay healthy, this is going to be a really good offense. Now, Mikey Matuk out there in center field, I'm not sure he's going to be great for them. He struggled a lot last year for the Rays, so they're going to have to find something better. Whether it's going to be in-house with Jacoby Jones, who I think could actually work out well, or Tyler Collins out there, as long as he's not giving a middle finger to the fans. But that bullpen, K-Rod, I think is still going to be consistent enough. Not great, though. It's not that deep. You have Bruce Rondon and Justin Wilson, the lefty. But this is a team that I think could make some noise because of how good their offense can be and how good their top three rotation players have in their ceilings and whatnot. Now, a player to look out for this team continues to be underrated for this team. I think it's Nick Castellanos, the third baseman. He really doesn't go that high in drafts. I mean, he's still getting up there because of last year he put together a good year. But because he's probably not going to bat in the top part of the lineup, he gets a little lost in the mix. If you need a third baseman late in drafts, I think Nick Castellanos can be a big part of it, especially because this offense is going to give a lot of runs, I believe, with the greatness. It's also part of this lineup. Now for the first place team, and here we go. It's obvious who my first place team is going to be. Because process of elimination, if you know your American League Central, it's the defending American League champions, the Cleveland Indians, are my winner for the American League Central. And there's really only one way to put this. And there's only one reason. Not one reason. There's a lot of reasons to pick this team to win the division. But it's Cody Allen. I don't know if you've ever heard of this guy. Andrew Miller. And even guys like Brian Shaw, they bring in a lefty specialist in Boone Logan. This is a team that's going to have a very insanely good bullpen. Oh, and by the way, Corey Kluber, the top of the rotation. Oh, and by the way, Carlos Carrasco, if he can be healthy. Danny Salazar as well, if he can stay healthy. Oh, Trevor Bauer, Josh Tomlin. Good to finish that. And maybe one of those guys can't stay healthy. Well, Ryan Merritt showed what he could do in the postseason last year. Mike Clevenger was serviceable last year. Oh, and by the way, you got Francisco Lindor, one of the best young shortstops in the major leagues. Oh, yeah, and by the way, the most underrated player possibly in the American League, Jose Ramirez, played third base. Oh, yeah, and by the way, Carlos Santana. Oh, yeah, and by the way, they brought in Edwin Encarnacion, who is an upgrade over Mike Napoli. Was great for them last year. But he's an upgrade. No doubt about it. Edwin Encarnacion is an upgrade at the designated hitter position, whether he'll might platoon with Carlos Santana, one plays first base, the other DHs, but he's an upgrade 100% over Mike Napoli. And Mike Napoli was great last year, don't get me wrong. Any production they can get from the catcher spot, obviously Roberto Perez did humans work during the playoffs and had some pretty good at-bats for them, but Jan Gomes, maybe he can get together. It's going to be big to get Jason Kipnis back from injury and Michael Brantley. Especially, it's more concerning with Brantley. I know Kipnis has the injury now and it's more recent, but getting Brantley back is going to be big. And if Brantley comes back strong and better than ever, and if Kipnis can get back on the field and do what anything like he was last year, this team could be the best team in the American League because not only of the great rotation, the great hitting, they probably have the best back end of the bullpen in the league because of what Andrew Miller has brought to them since the trade with the New York Yankees. A sleeper pick on this team, I want to say Michael Brantley, maybe because he's going later in drafts and he can come back hard from that injury. But I'm hard pressed not to say Jose Ramirez because of how underrated I think he is. He goes in about it's in 10-team leagues, I'm saying. He goes in probably around the 16th, 17th round. Maybe someone who's very bullish on him like me takes him a little bit earlier. But Jose Ramirez is a very good player that's going to get you, I think, close to as many games, as long as he's healthy, as 160. I mean, he's going to get up there, I think, in games. He'll hit in the middle of the lineup. He could hit for power. He could steal a lot of bases for them, which this team is going to run rampant all over the base pass. So if you need stolen bases, you can go after him, go after Linder early in the draft. They don't have Rajay Davis to play center field, so maybe that defense out there is going to rely more on Tyler Naquin. He's a guy you probably can get in the last couple of rounds of the draft, maybe even a free agent pickup who could be big. Abraham Almonte could be what Rajay Davis was, maybe. But this is just a great team that is going to put together a great season for sure. So I appreciate you guys for listening to this podcast. You can tweet at me at EricH1045. That's my preview of the American League Central. Stay tuned for the rest of the division previews right here on 1045theteam.com and youtube.com/team1045. And as always, I'll see you next time on the Sittin Sportside podcast.
Can't wait.